From New York each weekday. So glad that you're with us. AFA Today on AFR Talk in the shadow of the Freedom Tower, which I find to be important, north of the Trinity Cemetery, where some of the signers of our Declaration are buried. And just a very historic spot. We're privileged to come to you every day. AFA Today on AFR Talk. And in light of current events, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about some of those things related to our national security. Kevin McCullough is my name. My phone number is 888-589-8840. It should have been the top story today. It should have been the front page newspaper item. It should have been the top lead item on most of the television broadcasts. The fact that it has not been, to me, is a crying scandal. What am I talking about? Yesterday, Leon Panetta, former defense secretary and former CIA director, along with CIA deputy director Michael Morrell, two administration members of the Obama administration, came out in a press conference and said together they believe that the Select Committee on Benghazi is not only important, but should go forward. And they advised Democrats, people of their own party, to participate. Last week on this broadcast, I had nothing but Democratic callers, people who voted for President Obama, tell us whether or not they felt like the Democrats should participate in the Select Committee on Benghazi. To this moment, we have still not had a Democrat call in to say that they shouldn't. And then lastly on this measure, I saw just some headlines in the last break. Trey Gowdy has actually been threatened. His life has actually been threatened by some Democratic activists. What do you make of this wide-reaching Democratic response to the Select Committee on Benghazi? I wanted to speak with retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, who joins us now from Washington, D.C. General, welcome. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you here.
Kevin, I'm glad to be with you.
When you hear that Leon Panetta and Michael Morrell have come out and said this committee should go forward and Democrats should participate in it, what goes through your mind?
Well, I can just see the staff at the White House, as well as the key leaders in the administration, just squirming. I would bet you that this was not coordinated with the administration in terms of this support. I can also see the leadership of the Democratic Party in the House and Senate squirming right now as well, because these are two very key people. One was the Secretary of Defense and the other one was the acting director of CIA, and they are both supporting this and, as you said, encouraging Democrats to participate. I would bet you there is an awful lot of squirming up there right now trying to figure out how they're going to spend this new revelation.
But, General, if our media doesn't do its job and doesn't report, they won't have that much squirming to do. And the fact that this popped up on one or two conservative websites, but I have yet to see it appear on a major news website, and I have yet to hear any coverage of it, even on friendly cable news. What is your take on why this didn't make more news?
Well, I tell you what, you understand the media better than I do, but I will also say I think it's important to remember that less and less Americans get their information and their news from the major news networks. Look, ABC, CBS, and NBC, they're all struggling. And, of course, throw in MSNBC, and they are all struggling now for market share. More and more people are getting their news online, and obviously talk radio has become enormous in terms of reliability and people trusting what they get. So I think that it's not a disaster that the mainstream media is not carrying this, because I think the attitude towards them is declining every day. So the fact that you're broadcasting this, it will come out in other conservative kind of news outlets, I think is a very positive in this situation.
We're speaking with Lieutenant General retired Jerry Boykin, who now serves with the Family Research Council in Washington, D.C. And General, let's go back to 9/11, 2012. The afternoon, the notice comes to the administration that our boys are under attack, the consulate's under attack. We start to understand that the compound not far away begins to ask if they can help and respond. What we understand to be the series of events on the U.S. side of the water is that very quickly Defense Secretary Leon Panetta pretty much eliminated this being anything other than a terrorist attack, and within 15 to 20 minutes was on his way to tell President Obama that very thing. We don't know where the president went for all of those hours. We don't know why Hillary Clinton did not call the number 2 person in Libya back. But there seemed to be an enormous amount of questions about the timeline, about where people were at, about why response went the way it was. And what we've been told by those that have circled the wagons in Washington and in New York is that it's nobody's business, and it's such old news now. Will this select committee have the opportunity to do the important work of getting answers to the questions that especially the family members of the victims of that night still have not had answered?
Well, thanks. I think what you just said is very important. First of all, it does make a difference. What difference does it make? It makes a huge difference, because this is about the character of this nation. Not only the character today, but the character in the future. If we will put people in the harm's way and then not follow a long-standing value or ethos and go to the sound of the guns when they need us, when they're under duress, if America won't do that, it is a character flaw that we cannot recover from. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think that what this investigation is going to reveal is that the president himself was totally unengaged on this issue. The second thing that I think is going to point out is that the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, made some very bad decisions up front and then could not recover from those decisions. Example, she made a decision up front not to deploy an interagency team called the Foreign Emergency Support Team, the FES team. Now, that was created to be able to respond to exactly these kinds of incidents. And then I think what you're going to find is that the military does have some culpability. I want the members of Congress to ask the questions, what courses of action did you offer to the administration? What did you recommend to Leon Panetta as courses of action that could be executed? And then when we find out what those courses of action were, then they have to circle back and say, okay, what when you offered those courses of action? Because military courses of action immediately. It may be ground option, air, maritime option, at all. But what options were offered, and what guidance did you get with regards to those options? Don't tell me that now that you look back on it, you couldn't get there in time, because there is no way you knew that at the time. So I think the military's got to be taken to task on this as well.
Yeah, and I think that I think some of those early talking points, when you get testimony like the Air Force general that came before the committee a couple of weeks ago, and before that, some of the other voices that have come forward, that point being that we didn't know how long the attack was going to ensue and continue. So how could you know if people could get there in time or not? And then you've got, I've heard from casually, but I will admit, military people that were off the record. I have a brother-in-law who, for instance, is a Navy pilot, and we've had discussions about different things that could have been achieved. And it seems like the technology and the manpower certainly were within range of being able to respond, depending on how long the attack went. And to know that it lasted 7-8 hours in length and was so deadly at the end for those heroes, those Navy SEALs that went against all odds, got everybody out except the ambassador, and then got them safely back to the compound, but ended up losing their lives because of the attack there. It just seems, General, a very sad handling of what could have been a totally different scenario if we had responded the way we normally do, or it seems like we would have normally done in the past. Your final thoughts on this from this perspective too. Some of the there's rumors that there have been death threats laid against Trey Gowdy in the last 24 hours. I've seen more than one headline talk about some anonymous threats coming in. What message does that send to the public that this kind of nonsense is even erupting into the news pages?
Well, I think this happens all the time. I think all of us that are, in the public eye get death threats from time to time. But I think that what it reflects is that there's a core of people who really believe that the first and foremost consideration has to be protecting Obama, Clinton, and the Democratic Party. Now, I don't know who these people are. These people that issue death threats are wackos. The question is what motivates them, and I suspect that they have some really misplaced, demented loyalty to one or all of those three things that I just talked about. I mean, why else would you threaten Trey Gowdy, who has been identified as the chair of this special committee, other than the fact that you don't want the truth to come out because of the harm and impact it may have on those people?
At the end of the day, it is a sad chapter when the victims of these servicemen had their hands shaken and looked into the eyes of at Andrews Air Force Base when the caskets came home and basically told the same lie that we now know Susan Rice was coached to tell on television. Just a very, very sad day. I think there's a natural thing in all of us, General, that wants to see some form of at least justice take place here, at least getting the truth on the record and at least setting the record straight. That these men did not die in anything other than trying to serve their country and save some people, but they were put in a very difficult situation. The longer the time elapsed and the less decisions were made and the less confidence there was in those decisions. General, I know you're a busy man. Thank you for pulling out of meetings to talk with us this afternoon. I sure appreciate it.
Glad to be with you anytime, Kevin.
All right. Retired Lieutenant General Jerry Boykin, who is now the operations director at Family Research Council, and you can contact them at frc.org, frc.org. But, yeah, so for the final few minutes here, I just want to give you, again, the details of what should be the number one news story in America today. This should have been on the front page of every print publication. This should have been on the front page of every website. It should have been the lead story in every newscast, local and national. The fact that you have former administration, secretary and undersecretary level positions speaking out and saying the opposite of the administration, speaking out and saying this select committee on Benghazi should go forward. This select committee on Benghazi should be cooperated with. This select committee should do their best in a unified effort to dig as deep as necessary to find answers to every last question that is still not answered. And I'm not here to make judgments about the questions that aren't answered, but I can make judgments about the fact that they're not answered. And that's troubling. If the president won't release his schedule for whatever reason, why? Why won't he tell us where he went that night? Why isn't there just a simple, okay, here's the schedule, here's what he did, here's the minutes of his day? But we know that for about 8 hours, for most of the duration of the attack, he was unreachable, out of pocket. There's speculation he was sleeping, or he had snuck away to something else, or he was preparing for his fundraiser the next day. But whatever it is, we need an answer for that. Because this is a point in time when American men and women were under fire on our property, on pieces of the United States. Our consulate, our compounds, our embassies, that's our land, that's our property. We should have the right to expect that our nation is going to defend us in those places, and especially someone who's a public servant. So I want to know where the president was. I want to know why Hillary spoke to the number 2 in Libya. He requested as much help as was humanly possible. He made clear the need that was being demonstrated and made it very clear that they needed quick action. And she says, I will call you back, and he's still waiting for that phone call. I want to know why, after Defense Secretary Panetta told the White House that this was a terrorist action, I want to know why the White House coached Dr. Susan Rice to go out and to tell the nation something completely different. And I want to know why the president repeated that story at the UN even weeks later. And I want to know why he repeated it again in the presidential debates. I want to know why there was not an honest accounting for what actually he was told happened 15 minutes into the scenario. I don't think that's too much to ask. It doesn't make us a horrible human being for asking that. It's not something that is targeting him for any reason other than we just need to know. And if there's not a good reason, then there needs to be accountability for that as well. Here's what former CIA Director Michael Morrell said. He said, if you look at the polling numbers, a significant percentage of the American people still have major questions. Panetta, a former Central Coast congressman, Democratic Party stalwart, added, there needs to be an investigation to lay out the full story to the public. The problem has been sometimes bits and pieces of information keep coming out and only raising more questions. Here are two administration members of the Obama team that I got to give major props to today. They're telling the truth. The nation needs to know what happened. This select committee in Benghazi, all the talking heads are trying to put it down. They're saying it has complete legitimacy. And that should be the top story in the country right now. Kevin McCullough, glad you're with us every single day. Please make an effort to put on your calendar every day, same time, obliterate confusion, amplify truth, pursue clarity. I want to say thank you to Lieutenant General Boykin for joining us. I want to say thank you to Jake Veely and everyone behind the scenes, Cedra and Brent and everybody else that puts the show together. Great job today. And coming up next, Brian Fisher, Focal Point. The Silver Fox is, he's in the hen house, and he's ready to go. I don't know if that's a good analogy. Please don't get mad, Brian, if I heard it and offended you. I didn't mean to. Oh, by the way, go see Mom's Night Out this weekend. I'm Kevin McCullough. We'll see you tomorrow.